What if the most powerful move in the royal family wasn't made in public, but whispered in a shadowed corridor of Balmoral? While Camilla basked in ceremonial praise, Duchess Sophie was handed something far more potent, a royal assurance sealed under velvet and silence. Now, that buried promise has exploded into public view, shaking the monarchy to its core. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It had been years in the making. Silent glances, discreet acknowledgements, and cryptic nods from Charles to the one woman he had come to trust beyond the throne. Sophie, often cast to the quiet edges of royal ceremonies, had become his emotional anchor during Philip's memorial, where the pivotal moment occurred. Standing apart from the noise, Charles leaned in not with pomp, but purpose, and whispered a phrase that changed everything. "There will be something for you." To onlookers, it was nothing. To those who understood Windsor's coded language, it was a coronation in disguise. Since Edward's quiet rise and unwavering support during turbulent scandals, Charles had grown ever closer to Sophie, admiring her resilience and steadiness. Unlike Camilla, whose approach was assertive and political, Sophie operated in shadows, always there, never overreaching, yet ever loyal. Soon after that whisper, unpublicized upgrades to Sophie's security detail began. She was suddenly flanked by the same tier used for senior royals, including specific clearances at Sandringham and Holyrood. The public remained unaware, but within the palace halls, murmurs began. "She's being positioned." Then came the revelation of letters handwritten by Charles, tucked into the private archives, referring to Sophie as the calming presence our family never knew it needed. This sentiment, once thought merely affectionate, was now seen as prophecy. With Camilla already frustrated by being excluded from select meetings on the future of royal patronage, her resentment simmered. She was being bypassed not just in scheduling, but in proximity, decision-making, and affection. The fracture widened each time Charles paused for Sophie's counsel, while Camilla was met with closed doors. But the final twist lay buried in the royal archives, hidden since 1898 under Appendix Windsor 4. A clause about a dormant title, Countess Royal. It hadn't been used in over a century. There was no fanfare, no announcement, just a velvet-lined envelope quietly prepared at Clarence House under tight watch. It was addressed to Sophie, sealed in midnight blue wax and dispatched under escort. But when the sealed envelope emerged from Clarence House's midnight dispatch, no one could deny it any longer. Sophie had been chosen, and the Queen Consort had been outmaneuvered. It arrived under heavy guard, one envelope, one signature, and centuries of precedent undone. The title Countess Royal hadn't been seen in living memory. And now, Duchess Sophie held it in her trembling hands. What was hidden in the midnight ink that even Camilla was forbidden from reading? For decades, the royal family had operated within an ironclad structure of tradition. Every title, every gesture, followed a ritual honed by centuries of precedent. So when a sealed envelope bearing the crimson wax of Appendix Windsor 4, emergency codicil, arrived unannounced, even the most seasoned aides went silent. Its presence alone was enough to command a room. The insignia was unmistakable, but what sent shockwaves through the inner court was the signature, Charles R., etched boldly above the traditional royal crest, a personal decree from the king himself delivered without consultation from Council Clarion, bypassing the high officers of the crown. It was an unorthodox act of sovereignty, one that had not occurred since Queen Victoria carved a path no one dared follow until now. As the envelope was discreetly handed to Sophie behind closed doors, the message it carried detonated within the palace like a silent bomb. She read it once, then again, her fingers pausing over the ink that confirmed it. She was now Countess Royal, a title thought permanently retired. But this was no mere honorific gesture. Within the decree were hidden clauses, coded sections granting her ceremonial precedence in public events, access to restricted royal chambers, and strategic oversight of select patronages. It elevated her above the Queen Consort in visibility and proximity to the monarch, especially during state occasions. This wasn't courtesy, this was structure, this was placement. The aides were rattled. "This is no honorary gesture," one of them was heard whispering. This is protocol disruption. This is power redistribution. By the time Camilla's private staff received word of the decree, it was too late. They requested a copy of the codicil but were firmly denied, forbidden from viewing a document that fundamentally rewrote the balance of royal authority. One senior staffer allegedly stormed out, slamming a folder and muttering, "He didn't even tell her." Within hours, internal correspondence shifted. Invitations to foreign dignitary events began listing Sophie's name directly below the monarch, with Camilla's pushed into shared representation categories. The ceremonial hierarchy, once rigid and unquestioned, was fracturing. Behind the scenes, the sovereign's orders were already being restructured, and yet the public remained unaware. The palace made no announcement, there was no press release. But those within the crown's inner sanctum knew precisely what had happened. A door had closed on Camilla, and one had been flung open for Sophie. But this was no symbolic maneuver. Behind Sophie's sudden rise was a quiet campaign, years in the making, and Camilla's growing isolation was no accident. While Camilla fought for public visibility, Sophie mastered the palace's silent corridors. Years of service, discretion, and emotional intelligence turned the overlooked Duchess into Charles's secret weapon. Behind the veil of modesty was a queen in waiting. Camilla never saw her coming. Long before titles were shuffled and precedents rearranged, Sophie had already earned her place within the king's inner circle, not by demanding it, but by quietly becoming indispensable. When Camilla faced a series of health complications and was forced to withdraw from several public engagements, it was Sophie who filled the vacuum. Without spectacle, without headlines, she stepped into the role of calm stabilizer, attending briefings Charles couldn't miss, and ensuring continuity where chaos threatened. The public may not have noticed, but within the House of Windsor, a new rhythm had begun to form, one that pulsed to Sophie's steady presence. At Commonwealth receptions, where tension between distant realms and an aging monarchy could spiral quickly, Sophie became the uncredited diplomat. Her ability to bridge formality with approachability allowed her to soothe uncomfortable silences and quell quiet dissent. Several ambassadors privately praised her for what they called invisible effectiveness, and Charles took note. Unlike Camilla, whose influence often came with friction, Sophie left no trail of conflict, only results. And when the royal family was rocked by Andrew's scandal, it wasn't Charles's courtiers who kept him composed during those turbulent weeks. It was Sophie. Her demeanor, unshaken, measured, and deeply empathetic, became a model for how to absorb shock while protecting the institution. But her quiet brilliance didn't stop at diplomacy. As the palace deliberated the future of its younger members, it was Sophie who took the lead in preparing Lady Louise for a formal role within the royal order. She orchestrated Louise's gradual integration into the Royal High Council, a move that now seems prophetic. The guidance was methodical study sessions, ceremonial instruction, personal mentoring, and it wasn't lost on Charles. In one of his handwritten notes to Edward, the king called Sophie's approach the definition of constitutional clarity. These private reflections later became reference points when the final decision to elevate her was made, and while many lobbied for visibility or influence, Sophie never asked for anything. Not once. She didn't leak to the press, didn't angle for roles, didn't demand recognition. But when something needed doing, something delicate, essential, unglamorous, she did it. One senior aide, now retired, put it plainly: she never asked, but she always delivered. Over time, this consistency became her weapon. Where Camilla wielded position, Sophie wielded presence. Where others broadcasted their value, Sophie proved hers in silence. And then came the moment when silence was no longer an option. As Charles finalized Sophie's elevation, Camilla sensed the shifting winds and responded not with diplomacy, but desperation. She launched an unannounced campaign to reclaim visibility, force private meetings, and demand clarifications on protocol adjustments that had already been quietly enacted. But with elevation comes exposure, and as Sophie stepped into the spotlight, Camilla launched a last-minute counter-offensive that stunned even the king. When Camilla stormed into the blue drawing room, royal protocol evaporated. Guards stepped aside. Charles's hand trembled. Sophie sat, still and poised, as the Queen Consort unleashed a torrent of fury not seen since the days of Diana. But one sentence from Charles ended the shouting and ended something far deeper. The blue drawing room had always been a space of diplomacy and order, but in a matter of moments, it became the battleground for one of the most dramatic confrontations in modern royal history. Camilla entered not as Queen Consort, but as a woman betrayed. Her voice cracked with rage, demanding answers, accusing her husband of humiliating her in silence. She decried the lack of consultation, the secrecy of the elevation, the way Sophie had been positioned deliberately, tactically above her. "You let her walk past me," she reportedly shouted. "You shattered the order we all swore to protect." Yet no aide moved, no advisor interjected. The silence from those present was chilling, their loyalty clearly shifting in real time. Charles did not rise to meet her. He simply stared at the ornate desk, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, it wasn't an apology, it was an edict. "It's already been signed, Camilla," he said, his voice heavy and resolute. That sentence, quietly spoken, was a royal dagger. It ended not just the argument, it marked the collapse of Camilla's remaining leverage. She had been bypassed by the man she once thought she controlled. The document couldn't be recalled, the title had already transferred. And with those words, Camilla understood the extent of her fading grip on power. Sophie, throughout the confrontation, remained silent. Her refusal to engage only deepened Camilla's fury. It wasn't smugness, it was sovereignty. She didn't need to defend her position, the decree had already spoken for her. Her calm presence in the face of Camilla's unraveling only reinforced what everyone in the room now sensed. There was a new axis forming in the monarchy, and it no longer revolved around the Queen Consort. Edward's arrival brought a fleeting hope of mediation. But the moment he stepped in and saw his wife holding the sapphire-clasped box Charles had just handed her, his face drained of colour. That box was no ceremonial trinket. It was the insignia reserved only for the highest-ranking female in the royal order. Charles looked him in the eye and said, "She will carry the crown's ceremonial command going forward." Edward said nothing. He knew there was no room for debate, no turning back. The torch had been passed not to him, but through his wife, and the message was irreversible. That single scene sent tremors through the palace. Word travelled faster than any press briefing could contain. Messages between senior staff became frantic. Historians were summoned to interpret protocol. Legal consultants reviewed the implications. No one could determine how much authority Sophie now wielded, but they all knew this wasn't a ceremonial elevation. As word leaked from the blue drawing room, panic and confusion spread across the royal court. What did the Countess Royal's title really mean for Camilla's future? It's more than a name. The title Countess Royal rewrites the palace blueprint. In ceremonies, in precedence, in legacy, Sophie now sits above the Queen Consort. What does this mean for coronations, state visits, and the unseen power web within the crown? The transformation wasn't just symbolic, it was structural. The moment Sophie was declared Countess Royal, the royal order of precedence was quietly adjusted. In a document issued by the Lord Chamberlain's office, never released to the press, Sophie's new standing was officially placed above the Queen Consorts in key ceremonial contexts. The rationale cited exceptional royal trust and delegated state duties, a phrase not used since Queen Mary's day. Suddenly, at state banquets and official receptions, Sophie would stand closer to the sovereign, speak before Camilla, and receive foreign dignitaries in a higher capacity. It was an invisible reshuffling of power, but the consequences were impossible to miss. Within the Crown estate, access protocols changed overnight. Vault records showed Sophie had been granted entry into the Eastern Collection Wing of Windsor, the same area previously restricted to reigning consorts. These archives, often containing sealed codicils, state correspondences, and dynastic heirlooms, now bore a new clearance stamp, Senior. Notably, the monogram stood not for Sophie Rhys-Jones, but for Sophie Regina, a stylized cipher that sent shockwaves through staff corridors. This was more than an honor. It was the laying of a foundation for something deeper. Legal teams were even summoned to assess inheritance implications. If Charles fell ill or abdicated, Could Sophie serve in a constitutional deputy role, akin to a regent? The question was asked, and unsettlingly, no one could answer with certainty. Foreign diplomats began adjusting protocols. At an embassy gala in Lisbon, Sophie's name was listed ahead of Camilla's in official briefings. French officials, noting the change, contacted Clarence House for clarification, and were met with no comment. But perhaps the most jarring sign came not from official documents, but from Windsor's walls. Camilla's portrait, unveiled with fanfare just a year prior, was discreetly moved from the grand corridor to a smaller side gallery near the Queen Mother's former quarters. In its place, an empty SP. Ace, reserved. Staff were told nothing, but speculation pointed to a pending portrait of the Countess Royal. Behind the gilded silence, another shift unfolded. Sophie was quietly ushered into private state council sessions, previously the domain of reigning consorts only. Her presence wasn't just tolerated, it was requested. When aides were instructed to prepare briefing folders, they carried the new cipher. SNR was embossed on the covers, marked with the same deep blue Charles had long reserved for sovereign acts. One aide reportedly whispered, "This is the start of something irreversible." What began as a whispered title had grown into a new constitutional limb. But it wasn't just power Sophie inherited, it was a burden that threatened to break her family apart from the inside. As Sophie rose, her family felt the heat. Edward, steadfast, loyal, was caught between two forces, the wife he loved and the monarchy he'd sworn to serve. And young Louise, she made a move no one expected, one that split the Windsor court down the middle. The title of Countess Royal may have elevated Sophie in the eyes of the nation, but within the House of Windsor, it triggered a chain reaction laced with uncertainty and division. Edward, long respected for his composure and aversion to scandal, now found himself thrust into a role he never asked for, one that quietly outranked his older brother Andrew, and more disruptively, placed him as the consort of the woman now overshadowing the Queen Consort herself. It was a shift that demanded allegiance, and for Edward, choosing Sophie meant distancing himself from a brother already bruised by scandal and sidelined by the crown. This elevation wasn't just about protocol, it was personal. The tension between duty and loyalty had never felt heavier, but it was Louise's unexpected decision that truly reshaped the family's trajectory. In the days following her mother's elevation, she submitted a handwritten oath signed and sealed under royal witness, declaring her full return to active royal duties. In it, she referred to herself as Princess Royal Guardian, a title that had no precedent, yet was quietly accepted by Charles. The move, coordinated with Sophie behind closed doors, effectively placed Louise within the constitutional framework reserved for senior royals. And it didn't stop there. She began attending preparatory sessions with the High Council, and was spotted entering royal briefings previously restricted to heirs or reigning consorts. The young woman, once shielded from the press, was now emerging as a strategic figure, one backed by her mother's rising influence. Within Council Clarion, internal debates flared. Some voiced concern over the concentration of authority within a single family line. Others defended it as a necessary recalibration in the face of instability. The appointment of Louise sparked quiet resistance from factions still loyal to Camilla, with murmurs that the king was bending the rules to empower Sophie's legacy at the expense of long-standing hierarchies. The division became visible when Zara Tyndall and Princess Eugenie took divergent paths. Zara remained neutral, while Eugenie, who had once supported Sophie's quiet work, now stepped back, declining a ceremonial role at a planned event. It was a signal. Allegiances were shifting, and the once united Windsor circle was splintering. Behind palace walls, rumours swirled that Camilla had privately confronted Edward. Their conversation, according to two senior aides, ended with Camilla leaving the room in visible distress. She reportedly accused Edward of complicity, of failing to warn her, of standing silent while she was erased from the frame. Edward, it is said, responded only with, "I chose the one who never asked for a throne but was given anyway." But even as internal fractures widened, Charles made a public declaration that ignited global headlines and ensured Sophie's rise could never be undone. Tens of thousands stood below. Cameras clicked in rapid fire. But when the balcony doors opened at Buckingham, it was Sophie who stepped forward beside the king. Camilla hesitated, then stepped back. It was no accident. It was royal theatre of the highest order. The palace had released no seating chart, no protocol briefing, no advance notice. All eyes waited for the expected arrangement, Charles at the centre, Camilla at his side. But when the velvet curtains parted and the royal family appeared, it was the Countess Royal who emerged at the king's right. For a fleeting second, the cameras faltered. Was it a misstep, a staging delay? But then Charles extended his arm not to guide but to welcome Sophie into the lead position. She didn't falter, she didn't glance back. She stood firm as the crowds erupted below, not just for the monarch, but for the woman now standing where Camilla once had. The message was clear, and it pierced deeper than any proclamation ever could. Camilla stood in the shadows of that moment, physically, symbolically, emotionally. Instead of stepping forward, she lingered just behind Princess Beatrice, her expression strained, her body language uncertain. No one offered her a hand, no aid redirected her. This was not a snub, it was a statement, and everyone on that balcony knew it. Behind her, royal staff exchanged glances, but none dared speak. Inside the royal mews, the Queen's personal team stood in stunned silence. They had been told Camilla would lead the visual line. Instead, they watched a royal reversal unfold in front of millions. The world press moved quickly. By the hour's end, headlines flooded global feeds. Sophie, not Camilla, stands with the king. Political commentators, constitutional experts, and royal watchers alike struggled to decode the move. But for those who understood the language of monarchy, it needed no translation. This wasn't logistics, this was legacy management. Sophie's collar bore the same crown jewels pin last seen during Elizabeth's final jubilee, a piece reserved only for royals entrusted with ceremonial continuity. It had not been seen since the Queen's final summer. For Charles to place it on Sophie's collar now was no coincidence. It was succession, staged in silence. Social media ignited instantly. Hashtags like hashtag Countess Royal, hashtag Crown Shift, and hashtag Camilla out-dominated trending charts across the UK, Australia, and Canada. Analysts called it the balcony betrayal. Supporters called it the correction. Every still frame, every pixel of Sophie's expression was dissected, analysed, praised. Camilla's absence from the front was equally scrutinised. Her defenders called it strategic restraint. Her critics called it abdication in disguise. Either way, one truth held: Sophie had arrived. Not in secret, not in shadows, but in plain view of the realm. Just as the world reacted, a final, sealed directive from Charles was released, one that confirmed Camilla's role would never be the same again. In a move no monarch has dared since Henry VIII, Charles reassigned ceremonial state duties, removing them from his wife and placing them in Sophie's charge. Royal foundations, Commonwealth councils, and even patronages once Camilla's pride were now marked transferred. It wasn't just preference, it was exile. The document came without fanfare, but its signature echoed louder than any royal proclamation of the last 50 years. Titled The Royal Realignment Decree, it bore Charles's unmistakable handwriting and the sovereign's gold seal. Beneath it was a list, dozens of duties, ceremonial roles, symbolic affiliations, all previously held by Camilla. From the National Trust patronage to the Commonwealth Women's Forum, from royal nursing honours to diplomatic councils, each marked with a chilling stamp, reassigned to the Countess Royal. The decision wasn't whispered, speculated, or leaked. It was formal, irreversible, and strategically published within the court's confidential ledger. For those who understood the weight of such reallocation, the message was impossible to misinterpret. The Queen Consort had been structurally and institutionally replaced. The official statement issued by the Royal Communications Office framed it in polished language, a constitutional measure to ensure balance and continuity in the new royal age. But no amount of gilded phrasing could conceal the truth. This was a withdrawal, a systematic removal of Camilla from the arteries of the monarchy's operational power. What she had built over 2 decades was now, piece by piece, being handed to Sophie, the woman she had once viewed as peripheral. And now, that woman had become the Crown's living compass. Sophie's first appearance under the new decree was at the Royal Military Hospital in Wiltshire, a location Camilla had visited annually with pride. But this time, the wreath was laid by Sophie. The speech was hers. The Royal Standard car bore her cipher, and among the gathered veterans, it was her name that was announced. Her Royal Highness the Countess Royal will now address the Assembly. There was no confusion, no hesitation. The transition had been executed flawlessly. Within hours, Charles made a rare personal statement at a Privy Council session, ending with a single line that shook the monarchy's foundation: "Sophie will carry the Crown's conscience." That phrase, repeated later by royal press liaisons, became the symbolic confirmation that Sophie's elevation was not ceremonial, but institutional. She wasn't filling in. She wasn't standing in. She was now the primary vessel of Charles's long-term royal vision. A monarch who once relied on Camilla for emotional anchoring had now restructured the realm around a new axis of trust and strategy, and Sophie was the nucleus. Camilla, reportedly devastated, withdrew to Realigning House, the private residence she had clung to throughout her royal years. No statement was issued. No appearance was made. Windsor fell silent on her behalf. And for the first time since becoming Queen Consort, she was no longer listed on the weekly Crown circular. The exclusion was as loud as any headline. She had been pulled not just from duties but from orbit. But in the end, this wasn't just about Camilla or Sophie, it was about the kind of monarchy Charles envisioned, and the woman he trusted to protect it. From overlooked royal to the Crown's chosen guardian, Sophie's journey rewrote what it means to serve, survive, and ascend in the most powerful family in Britain. As Camilla retreats and the monarchy reshapes, one thing is clear: the Countess Royal isn't just a title. It's a turning point. The public saw it almost instantly. What once drew indifference now commanded admiration. Polls surged in Sophie's favour, with headlines calling her the modern royal conscience. She was described as composed, principled, and unshakably loyal, a rare figure in a family often clouded by controversy. Her speeches, once sidelined, were now quoted across platforms. Her presence was seen not just as dignified, but necessary. While others had faltered or fought for attention, Sophie had risen quietly, and that quiet had turned into authority. Camilla, once central, was now peripheral. Her remaining titles, Queen Consort, patron of select arts foundations, remained intact, but were stripped of real influence. She was given ceremonial ribbons, not power. There would be no return to the front lines. Then came the moment that confirmed Sophie's place in history. On a crisp morning shrouded in silence, she visited St. George's Chapel, Elizabeth's resting place. The press didn't know. No aides were briefed. But a single photo was leaked: Sophie kneeling, her hand on the stone, wearing the same sapphire pin Elizabeth had gifted her decades ago. The image went viral within hours. It wasn't orchestrated, it was authentic. And it struck a chord with the public that no staged event ever could. She wasn't just standing in the Queen's former place. She was carrying forward her spirit. Behind the scenes, power was continuing to realign. Lady Louise, once shielded from responsibility, now attended weekly briefings alongside Catherine and Princess Anne. Her role as Princess Royal Guardian had shifted from symbolic to functional. Together, the three women formed what insiders now call the trio of Reform: Anne, the executor, Catherine the heart, and Sophie the conscience. They weren't just representing the crown, they were shaping its direction, one decision at a time. It was unprecedented, and it was deliberate. In the final hours of a tense internal summit, a private diary entry from Charles was leaked, almost certainly with permission. The entry read, "She carries Elizabeth's calm. She carries the realm." That sentence, humble yet seismic, cemented Sophie's place in the royal legacy. It was no longer about birthright or media battles. It was about legacy, and who could be trusted to protect it. Sophie had not sought the power she now held, but when it was offered, she didn't hesitate. She stood her ground, she endured the storm, and she emerged not just respected but revered, And as the bells of W. Inza toll into a new dawn, the monarchy faces its boldest chapter yet, with Sophie standing where few believed she ever could. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.